Hi, I'm Dr. Sheldon Horowitz here at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. Welcome to the next of our Ask the Expert series. Today we'll be talking a little bit about learning disabilities in math, also known as dyscalculia. Let me begin by saying that there is no single type or single presentation of dyscalculia. Math learning disabilities present differently in different people. Each person will have a unique presentation, but there are some commonalities, and we'll talk about what learning disabilities in math look like in a moment. We know that learning disabilities in math, or dyscalculia, impacts people differently at different ages and different stages of development. We also know that there's a visual spatial component that's very important to the learning disabilities in math area, and that it's not just the numbers or the concepts underlying numbers that individuals with LD in math have, but also the language processes, the language of math that creates problems for these individuals. So when we talk about dyscalculia, we're talking about a specific learning disabilities in math, specific LD in math. So what are some of the presenting problems that individuals will have when they have dyscalculia? Well, clearly, in young children, you will see difficulties with recognition of numbers and symbols. Just like in reading, children with LD have difficulties looking at identifying letters and matching them with sounds. Recognizing numbers and recognizing symbols in the math domain are things that learning disabilities present with in children with dyscalculia. There's a fluidity and flexibility with numbers that also presents in these children. Think about it as a number sense. They have a sense as to how numbers work, what they do, and there's an ease with which they move in the math, counting, what do numbers mean, how do we work with numbers domain. There's a piece of math and the math disabilities problems that we see in children that has to do with their ability to visualize. When you think about numbers or you think about quantity, most competent math users, all competent math performers, will actually have some sort of a math number line or a numerical number line, a mental number line, if you will, that they can superimpose upon their thinking. So they'll know, for example, that when you think about 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that 4 is somewhere here and 1 is somewhere here. They see where numbers are in relation to each other. And children with learning disabilities in math, those with dyscalculia, often have difficulties visualizing what that math mental number line looks like and how it works. Counting is something that these children also struggle with. Not just in the counting of numbers, the 1, the 2, 3, 4, and 5, but the procedures involved with counting and the principles that underlie how it is that math happens and counting happens. They often have difficulty estimating and doing mental math. So if you look at a group of pennies on the table, they may have difficulty estimating how many there are on the table without actually counting them out. And doing that mental math, doing those kinds of approximations that help you get to an answer more quickly, those are things that children with dyscalculia, learning disabilities in math, will often struggle with. Measurement is something that becomes difficult over time, not just measurement in terms of length, the size of something, but also weight, looking at the area, approximating time and measuring time, measuring temperature, and then certainly as they get older, being able to manipulate and measure using money. Working with numbers, often very difficult as students move into the early grades, not just adding and subtracting, but understanding how sets of numbers work. So how 10s work, how 20s work, how 30s work, how groups of numbers and sets of numbers and quantities relate to each other. Patterns, another area of weakness for many students with learning disabilities in math. So for example, the ability to count by 2s or count by 5s or count by 10s, being able to distinguish patterns in the ways that they use numbers in sequence. Something that's also difficult for many students with learning disabilities in math falls within the domain of spatial relations. These are individuals who sometimes struggle tremendously reading maps or following a route or even knowing left from right and finding ways to apply that left-right dynamic or that understanding in what is sometimes just a very simple kind of a way, even as they get older. And then certainly up through the middle school and high school grades, very often it's difficult for these students with dyscalculia, learning disabilities in math, to follow formulas. Very often they have difficulty scoring games. A bowling alley, how do you figure out how to score bowling? Even sorting strategies if you have to organize things in a particular way. These are the kinds of things that we look for when we talk about learning disabilities in math. One of the other dynamics when we talk about LD in math is that there is a general sense of learned helplessness in many students. They just don't know what to do, and they wait for someone to help them sort of get out from under the problems that they're experiencing. They often look in the classroom like passive learners. They wait for someone to rescue them, and they don't quite know how to problem solve by themselves. If they're having weaknesses in areas of math learning, very often they can't hold on to, remember, and retrieve, and then pay attention to the kinds of things that they're learning. So memory and attention are problems that they'll experience in the math learning domain. Metacognition, a word that talks about how students reflect on what it is that they know, what they know about themselves as learners. Metacognition is also an area within the math learning disabilities domain that's also problematic. Last but not least, we also need to think about anxiety. Anxiety and stress in the math area could be enormously problematic, just like reading can be for children who are dyslexic or have other kinds of learning disabilities. Anxiety often takes its toll on students with learning disabilities, particularly in the area of math. Thank you for joining us today and for watching this video. If you have any comments on the video, or you would like to provide us with a comment or a question, please do so at ncld@ncld.org.